14 million people are alive today, or were alive to live full lives, because of decisions made by one mathematician, working in a cold mansion in the English countryside during World War II. That is not a metaphor. That is the conservative historical estimate. The man responsible was arrested 9 years later, chemically altered by court order, found dead 2 years after that, and the institution that did it to him took 60 years to say sorry. My name is not important. What is important is that you hear the complete version of this story, because the version most people know is missing the parts that matter most. Before we go in, I want to be clear about something. If you've seen The Imitation Game, the 2014 film with Benedict Cumberbatch, you've seen a version of this story, a well-made, well-acted, well-intentioned version. But film has limitations that documented history doesn't. The real Turing was more complicated than the film's hero. The real Bletchley Park was more chaotic than the film's drama. The real arrest was more bureaucratic and more brutal than anything the film showed. And the real ending, what actually happened in that room in Wilmslow in June 1954, is still, technically, an open question. This video doesn't dramatize. It documents. Everything you're about to hear is sourced from declassified government records, Turing's own letters, and the academic work of historians who have spent careers on this material for things by the end of this video that most people who know this story don't know. First, what Turing actually built at Bletchley was not what the film showed, and the difference matters enormously. Second, the legal process that destroyed him was not an aberration. It was a system working exactly as designed. Third, the apple beside his body, what the forensic evidence actually shows, not what people assume. Fourth, the 2013 royal pardon. Why the people closest to Turing's legacy called it inadequate. Stay with me. Alan Matheson Turing was born June 23, 1912, in Maida Vale, London. His parents spent most of his childhood in India for work. Alan and his brother were left in England with foster families. He was not a social child. He was not athletic, not popular. He was reported by teachers to be so absorbed in his own thinking that he would forget to hand in work, not because he hadn't done it, but because he had already moved on to the next problem in his head. At 16, he met a boy named Christopher Morcom at Sherborne School. Christopher was everything Alan wasn't socially, and also brilliant. They became close in the way that 16-year-olds become close when they find the one person who understands how their mind works. Christopher died suddenly of tuberculosis in 1930. Turing was 17. He never spoke about it publicly, but the people who studied his life closely noted that something shifted after Christopher died. He became more solitary, more internal, and more obsessively focused on his work. By 24, Turing had published On Computable Numbers, a paper that described, in theory, a machine that could solve any mathematical problem that could be expressed as an algorithm. He called it a universal computing machine. We now call it a computer. He published this in 1936. The first commercial computer wouldn't exist for another 15 years. He was describing something that didn't exist yet, in mathematical terms precise enough that engineers could eventually build it. But the work that would actually change the immediate course of history wasn't published. It was classified, and it happened in a place most people hadn't heard of until decades after the war ended. Bletchley Park is a Victorian mansion about 50 miles north of London. During World War II, the British government quietly assembled the most unusual collection of minds ever gathered in one place. Mathematicians, chess grandmasters, crossword champions, linguists, and at least one professional magician. Their job, break Nazi Germany's Enigma code. Enigma was an encryption machine that scrambled every message, using a combination of rotors and settings that changed every single day at midnight. The number of possible settings, 158 quintillion. That's not a typo. 158 quintillion. The Polish Cipher Bureau had made progress on early versions of Enigma before the war. They shared their work with Britain and France. just before Poland fell in 1939. This is the part the film gets right, but then compresses in ways that matter. Here's what actually happened at Bletchley, that the film simplified. Turing did not work alone. He did not work against his colleagues. He did not crack Enigma in a single moment of insight. What he actually did was more important and less cinematic. He led a team that built a systematic, mechanical process for eliminating wrong answers, faster than any human could. The machine he designed, called the bomb, was based on Polish work but fundamentally redesigned. It didn't decrypt messages directly. It ran through possible Enigma settings and eliminated ones that couldn't produce a given output. The insight was philosophical as much as mechanical. You don't need to find the right answer if you can eliminate all the wrong ones fast enough. By the end of the war, over 200 bomb machines were running across multiple locations in Britain. They processed thousands of messages daily. The intelligence produced, codenamed Ultra, gave Allied commanders advanced knowledge of German troop movements, supply routes, and attack plans. Military historian Sir Harry Hinsley wrote in his official history of British intelligence that Ultra shortened the war by not less than 2 years. Other estimates go higher. 14 million lives. Conservative estimate, documented in declassified British government records. When the war ended, Turing went back to his life, to his research, to his running. He was a competitive marathon runner, which almost no one knows, and to the part of himself that British law had decided was criminal. What happened in January 1952 began with a burglary. In January 1952, Turing's house in Wilmslow was broken into. He reported it to the police. During the investigation, he disclosed that the likely suspect was an acquaintance of a man he had been seeing, a 19-year-old named Arnold Murray. In doing so, voluntarily, apparently, without fully registering the legal implications, he disclosed that he and Murray had had a sexual relationship. Under the Sexual Offences Act 1885, this was a criminal offense. Gross indecency. Both men were charged. Here is what makes this case different from thousands of similar prosecutions of the same era. The man being charged had, 10 years earlier, done work that was still classified, that the British government couldn't publicly acknowledge, that the people prosecuting him had no official knowledge of. The man saving him was not available, because officially, as far as the law was concerned, there was nothing to save him from. He had committed a crime. The crime was being who he was. Turing was offered a choice: prison or probation, conditional on undergoing chemical treatment to reduce his sexual drive. He chose the treatment. He said he wanted to continue his work. The treatment was synthetic estrogen injections, administered over 12 months. In his letters during this period, available through the Turing Archive at King's College, Cambridge, he described physical changes. He described what the treatment was doing to his body and his mind. He described it with the same precise, clinical language he used for everything else, which somehow makes it worse to read. 2 years after the conviction, June 8, 1954, his housekeeper found him. He was 41 years old, and there was a half-eaten apple beside his bed. What the evidence actually shows about that apple is not what most people assume. The coroner's verdict was suicide by cyanide poisoning. The apple beside the body was never tested for cyanide. That fact is documented. The apple was not tested. The cyanide source was identified as a jar of potassium cyanide solution found in his home, which he used for electroplating experiments. He had a home chemistry lab. This was not unusual for him. What followed was years of speculation, organized around 2 main theories. Theory 1, suicide. The circumstances, the timing, the year after his conviction ended, the documented effects of the treatment. Those who hold this view argue the evidence is consistent with someone who had been systematically stripped of everything by a state. He had served more than almost anyone alive. Theory 2, accident. Turing's mother believed this until she died. She maintained he was careless in his home lab, working with cyanide, and that he would not have taken his own life. She wrote about this publicly. Theory 3, and this is where Documented history ends, and speculation must be clearly labeled. A small number of researchers have raised questions about timing and context related to his security clearance status being under review. There is no documentary evidence supporting a third party. This is mentioned only because it exists in the academic literature, not because it has evidentiary support. What is documented? The Apple was not tested. The inquest took 1 day. His security file remains partially classified. What is not documented? A note. There was no note. In 2009, 55 years after Turing's death, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown issued a formal apology on behalf of the British government. He called the treatment of Turing utterly unfair. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Turing a posthumous royal pardon. Both gestures were widely covered. Both were called historic. Here is what some of the people who had fought for Turing's recognition said about the pardon. They said it wasn't enough, not because it wasn't meaningful, but because Turing was one of approximately 49,000 men convicted under the same law. The pardon singled him out because of who he was and what he had contributed, which raised an uncomfortable question. Do the other 48,999 men not deserve the same acknowledgement? Were their lives worth less because they didn't crack an encryption code? In 2017, the British government passed what became known informally as the Turing Law, posthumously pardoning all men convicted under the historical legislation. It took until 2017 for a law passed in 1885, 132 years. Here is what I want you to actually take from this. Not that Turing was a hero, though the evidence supports that description by any definition. Not that the British government was uniquely cruel, because what happened to Turing was happening across dozens of countries under similar laws at the same time. What I want you to take from this is a question about systems. The same institution that needed Turing desperately enough to give him a building and a team and unlimited resources prosecuted him under a law that had been on the books for 67 years. The system didn't malfunction. It functioned exactly as designed. Understanding how systems function, even when the results are monstrous, is the only way to change them. That's what this channel is actually about. Not history for history's sake, but stories that help you read the world you're currently living in. The next video on this channel goes inside the story of Rosalind Franklin, the woman whose photograph of DNA became the foundation of one of the greatest scientific discoveries in human history. She was never told her work was being used. Watson and Crick won the Nobel. She died 4 years before they collected it. If this video gave you something, subscribe, because the next story is one you need to hear.